Bismillah walhamdulillah wa salatu wa salamu ala rasulillah wa ala alihi wa ashabihi wa man tabi'ahum bi ihsanin ila yawmiddin wa ba'd. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. All right, we're going to pick up where we left off, talking about some of the aspects related to al-Fidyah. We were talking about different types of Fidyah when it came to, trimming the hair, removing hair, fingernails, covering the head. And then we looked at hunting animals, what we have to do with that. And we concluded here at the end, the tail end of this section, where the Imam al-Bahuti rahimahullah ta'ala, he says, وَيَسْقُطُ بِنِسْيَانٍ وَجَهْلٍ وَإِكْرَاهٍ فِدْيَةُ لُبْسٍ وَطِيبٍ وَتَغْطِيَةِ رَأْسٍ دُونَ وَطْءٍ وَصَيْدٍ وَحَلْقٍ وَتَقْلِيمٍ. So basically, what he says here is that the expiation for fitted clothing, perfume, and covering the head is foregone due to forgetfulness, ignorance, or compulsion. Okay, so يَسْقُطُ بِنِسْيَانٍ وَجَهْلٍ وَإِكْرَاهٍ فِدْيَةُ لُبْسٍ وَطِيبٍ وَتَغْطِيَةِ رَأْسٍ. So there's three acts. And these three acts, this is the Fidyah or the lubs, makhit. We talked about that, wearing fitted clothing for men. Tibin, that's the perfume, and then taghtiyati ra'sin, which is to cover the head, and of course that's for men as well. And these three things constitute ma laysa fihi itlafun. Because the other ones, he says, لِأَنَّ ذَلِكَ itlafun, which is وَطْءٍ وَصَيْدٍ وَحَلْقٍ وَتَقْلِيمٍ. That's intimacy, hunting, as he mentions, intercourse, hunting, shaving, and clipping. Ibn Qa'id, he says, لِأَنَّ ذَلِكَ فَتَجِبُ مُطْلَقًا لِأَنَّ ذَلِكَ إِتْلَافٌ فَاسْتَوَى عَمْدُهُ وَسَهُ. So it doesn't matter the other ones. The fidyah has to be paid even if it was done forgetfully or if it was done intentionally. There's no distinction between those two cases because it's what contains itlaf. So there's a type of, like, it's gone, it's over, it's finished, there's a type of destruction or consumption. Unlike fitted clothing, perfume, and covering the head. Those things, like they can be removed and recovered from. So the first part, يَسْقُطُ بِنِسْيَانٍ وَجَهْلٍ وَإِكْرَاهٍ, basically that the expiation is foregone due to these things, whether it's ignorance, forgetfulness, or compulsion, is based on a hadith in which the Prophet ﷺ, he says, عُفِيَ لِأُمَّتِي عَنِ الْخَطَأِ وَالنِّسْيَانِ وَمَا اسْتُكْرِهُ عَلَيْهِ. So this hadith basically means that my ummah has been pardoned for their mistakes, what they have done ignorantly, what they have done forgetfully, and what they have been done out of compulsion, meaning they were kind of made to do something in which they would be sinful for otherwise. So that gives you an idea as to why these three things have been lumped together, using this hadith to apply the foregoing nature of that fidyah. He says, وَمَتَ زَالَ عُذْرُهُ أَزَالَهُ فِي الْحَالِ. And when the excuse ceases to exist, the excuse of these things, whether you remember all of a sudden, or you come into knowledge of a mistake that you've made, or you're no longer being compulsed or forced or coerced to do something. These are the excuses that would remove or forego that fidyah. Once they're removed, he says, أَزَالَهُ فِي الْحَالِ, you have to immediately remove whatever it was, لُبْسُ الْمَخِيط, or طِيب, or تَغْطِيَةُ رَأْسٍ. So you would have to now quickly move into removing those blameworthy things, which you cannot do while you're in a state of ihram, which we've discussed in some detail. Of course, and this would be, without, you have to recover immediately without going beyond what is an acceptable pace of doing it. So it doesn't have to be within the blink of an eye, like to remove libs al-makhit, to remove the fitted clothing. It's not that you have to all of a sudden just shred it right off of your body like the Hulk, you know, and rip it, because, Islam doesn't require us to damage property, but it would mean you need to now remove it in a normal fashion, or remove the tib, for example, in a normal fashion, or to uncover your head in a normal fashion without being extreme. And of course, this excludes this excuse here, or this provision, I should say. This is a provision that we have. Does not include, as he mentioned, the other acts which are impermissible: intercourse, hunting, shaving, and clipping. These are required regardless of the case. And so that should be taken into consideration. So that gives us, that concludes this section here that Imam has presented for us, just giving us an idea of some of the different rulings pertaining to the fidyah. The last part here, he says, وَكُلُّ هَدْيٍ أَوْ إِطْعَامٍ فَلِمَسَاكِينِ الْحَرَمِ إِلَّا دَمْ أَذَى وَلُبْسٍ وَنَحْوِهِمَا فَبِهِ وَحَيْثُ فَعَلَهُ وَدَمُ إِحْصَارٍ حَيْثُ أُحْصِرٍ وَيُجْزِئُ صَوْمٌ وَحَلْقٌ بِكُلِّ مَكَانٍ وَالدَّمُ شَاةٌ أَوْ سُبْعُ بَدَنَةٍ أَوْ بَقَرَةٍ. Okay, so that basically says here that every sacrificial animal, this is وَكُلُّ هَدْيٍ, every sacrificial animal or feeding belongs to the sanctuary's poor. So we're talking about al-haram, that's the sanctuary. So this is, he says, فَلِمَسَاكِينِ الْحَرَمِ, that the animal that's slaughtered, or the feeding of, for feeding as an act of fidyah. Remember we talked about removing a hair or a nail or two hairs or two nails, that requires a feeding of poor people. And so here, this is an example of when you would give the food. It would be for the poor people of al-haram, the sanctuary. Illa, he says, except for the expiations given for shaving the head, right? Fitted clothing, wearing libs al-makhit, that is, and similar things, which can be distributed there. They can be distributed there or wherever their causes are found. So we look at this just for a little moment. Here's كُلُّ هَدْيٍ أَوْ إِطْعَامٍ, basically that has something to do with al-haram or ihram. The animal that's sacrificed or the food that's given that has a relation to the haram or ihram. And so we've now talked about what you can and can't do in ihram and what you can and can't do in the haram. Like the outcome of hunting, for example. That's one example of this category. Or Imam Ibn Qa'idi says dam mut'ah, which is the animal that you're going to sacrifice if you're mutamatti', or qiran. You're bringing an animal that you're going to slaughter for the hajj rites. Or mandur, it's something that you have taken an oath, so it's become obligatory. وَمَا وَجَبَ لِتَرْكٍ وَاجِبٍ. So if you have left off something that is an obligation and you have to make up for that, then this is an animal that you're going to slaughter in that case. أو فعل محظور في الحرم, you did something that's impermissible in the sanctuary, فإنه يلزمه ذبحه بالحرم. So he's required then to slaughter that animal in the haram. Imam Ahmad's noted here, Ibn Qa'idi says, Ahmad said that Makkah wa Mina wahidun. So these places, Mecca and Mina, are the same. One and the same. One and the same. He goes on and he says, وَالْأَفْضَلُ نَحْرُ مَا بِحَجٍّ بِمِنَى. So what you have to slaughter for Hajj, it's best to be done in Mina. And what you have to slaughter for the sake of Umrah, in the event that there was a mistake committed for Umrah, it's best to be slaughtered bil Marwa. Because that's where you're ending, right? Right? Your Hajj is going to end when you're in Mina, because you have Ayyam Tashriq. So you're going to end your days of Hajj in Mina, and you're going to end your Umrah after you've made sa'i between Safa and Marwa, and you're going to end, we're going to look at that today inshallah, you're going to end at Marwa. So basically right there at the end of the rites, you're going to make that, that sacrifice. And then he says you have to divide the meat, or you have to pass it out, meaning you have to let the animal, either the meat or the animal, to go for al-masakin al-haram. Basically, the poor people who are there in the sanctuary. Because the concept here, or the goal, is to spend on them. And what we're talking about, the masakin al-haram, are the residents of the haram. They're the ones that live there, or those that are there because they're making hajj or some other reason, and they are recipients of zakat. There's a need for them to receive, this meat or an animal, because he says, "In sallamahu lahum hayyan fadhabahu." Right, if the man or the woman that had to provide this sacrifice were to give them, they were going to give them the animal alive, and then they were to sacrifice it, ajza'a, then that would suffice. The animal was slaughtered. Whether he did it or she did it or they did it, the recipients, it would be slaughtered and they would be able to consume that. Otherwise, if they weren't going to, they would give it back, and the one who was giving it would slaughter it. So that the goal was basically achieved. So that is for masakin al-haram. Illa dama adha. He says, except for the blood sacrifice due to al-adha, meaning halq. That is the trimming of the hair. Wadam lubsi makhitin. Lubsin, that's libsu makhis, basically wearing fitted clothing or other things like tib or taqtiyatu ra's. We've talked about those things as a category altogether. So when you're going to offer a sacrificial animal for committing those acts, it's not required that it be in the haram. But it would suffice a person to pass it out or distribute it in the haram, or it would suffice that person to distribute it wherever that infraction occurred. So you might cover your head min al-hil or fil hil. Right? You could be in the non-sanctuary, the non-sacred land. You're coming from far away. You've already made ihram. You're coming from Dhul Hulayfa, for example, from Medina. And now that you're on your way and you've committed such an infraction that requires you to offer a blood sacrifice. And so what we're saying here is you don't have to wait in order to do that in the sanctuary, but you can do it right there where the infraction occurred. So that's something that happened outside of the sanctuary, or within the bounds of the sanctuary, wherever that action occurred, then you can sacrifice the animal and you can distribute it there. So you have a little bit more leeway in terms of how you're going to manage the sacrifice. He says, وَدَمُ إِحْصَارٍ حَيْثُ أُحْسِرٍ, which basically means the restraint. If you're restrained, there's a blood sacrifice for that, meaning you were stopped. You can no longer continue to perform the rites and rituals due to whatever reason. And so now you have to offer a blood sacrifice. Perhaps you didn't make a condition, as we've talked about previously, that you're going to make that conditional statement that if I get stopped, then this place that I stop is my disengagement. In the case that you made that condition, then you're free and clear, you disengage, and you're done. That's all you have to do. If you didn't make that condition, then now you owe this blood sacrifice. And we see this happen during the time of the Prophet ﷺ, that he slaughtered his animal fi mawdi'i bil Hudaybiyah, right? He was there in al-Hudaybiyah. They were prevented from continuing forward, and so he went ahead and slaughtered an animal there as a sacrifice for being prevented. And of course, that was in the non-sacred land. So he was stopped. That was, as he says, وَدَمُ إِحْصَارٍ, the blood for restraint is spilt, meaning the animal slaughtered where the person was restrained. Fasting and shaving the head will suffice in any place, as he says, وَيُجْزِئُ صَوْمٌ وَحَلْقٌ بِكُلِّ مَكَانٍ لِأَنُّ لَا يَتَعَدَّ نَفْعُهُ لِأَحَدٍ. Basically, you can do it anywhere because there's no real benefit that's going to have an impact on anyone. فَلَا فَائِدَةَ لِتَخْصِيصِهِ, he says there's no point in specifying a particular location for those acts. Sawm, meaning fasting. Right? You're going to fast, it's not going to help anybody else. So it doesn't matter where it's done. So what constitutes a blood sacrifice? Right? We understand there's a sacrifice that has to be made. He says, وَالدَّمْ, we look here. He says, وَالدَّمْ شَاتٌ أَوْ سُبُعُ بَدَنَةٍ أَوْ بَقَرَةٍ. Giving us, like, this is what the blood sacrifice is. What is it exactly? It is a sacrificial animal. It's either going to be a sheep. So we're looking at a shat of 6 months. Shats could be jada'u dha'nin, which is a 6-month-old, or you're going to have thaniyu ma'zin, which is like a 1-year-old goat. So either you have like the sheep or you have the goat, those minimum age requirements, or you have subu'u badanatin or baqaratin. You can have a 7th of a camel or a 7th of a cow. And if you're going to slaughter the camel or the cow in its entirety, فَأَفْضَل, right? You're going to give a bigger animal. And if you're going to do it, then you have to, he says, وَتَجِبُ كُلُّهَا, meaning you have to وَزِّعْ. You have to go distribute the entire thing. You can't go, well, it's only a 7th, so I'll give a 7th and I'll keep 6/7. No. If you've done it for your blood sacrifice, you have to distribute it in its entirety, and you will, of course, have given much more than you would have been required for a smaller animal. He goes on and he says that the cow will suffice the camel, meaning you could do one or the other. Even when it comes to the game animals. And the same thing goes in the opposite direction. The camel will suffice a cow, meaning you can do one or the other. وَعَنْ سَبْعِ شِيَاهٍ بُدْنَةٌ. You could do 7. You could do 7 sheep or whatever, or a cow for a camel. Okay. And that wraps up that section. The next section is فَصْلٌ فِي جَزَاءِ الصَّيْدِ. So this is appraisal of game animals. We've alluded to this in some form or fashion, that there is going to be 2 different categories here. There are the animals which there is an equivalent according to the judgment of the companions of the Prophet ﷺ. They've said, look, if this animal is killed, then there's a replacement animal for that, and it's this. And then there's, of course, the animals that there's no like kind that would have to be judged based on the people of that speciality. They can tell you what the worth of that animal is, and then you can take care of it by way of its value, its current market value. So what we're looking at for the appraisal of game animals is going to be animals that have a similar animal that can be offered up in its place. So he begins here, the Imam, he says, فِي النَّعَامَةِ بَدَنَةً وَفِي حِمَارِ الْوَحْشِ وَبَقَرِهِ وَالْوَعْلِ بَقَرَةً وَفِي الضَّبَعِ كَبْشٌ وَفِي الْغَزَالِ عَنْزٌ وَفِي وَبَرٍ وَضَبٍ جَدْيٌ وَفِي يَرْبُعٍ جَفْرَةٌ وَفِي أَرْنَبٍ عَنَاقٌ وَفِي حَمَامَةٍ شَاةٌ وَمَا لَا مِثْلَ لَهُ فِيهِ قِيمَتُهُ. So here you can see a couple of things. For an ostrich, there's a camel. For a zebra, an antelope. And an ibex, there's a cow. For an aardwolf, there is a sheep. Aardwolf. How do you like that? What's the word in Arabic? Dhaba'. Yeah, some people might say hyena. Yeah. No, they're not the same, but they're from the same category. Yeah, so you know the hyena is the one they show on the TV all the time against the lions. Yeah, so there's some debate about that. I chose aardwolf here because the aardwolf comes from the same family as the hyena. It just doesn't eat other animals. It's an insectivore. Yeah, Ibn Qayyim has a thing that he wrote about this. Because in general we understand that the animal of prey, or the predatorial animal, you can't eat it, right? Because it consumes other animals. So the hyena eats other animals, right? So that the argument is that the al-Dhab' here is not talking about that one. It's talking about the insectivore, the one that only eats insects. It looks very similar. It's not quite as big, but it does have what do they call it? Nab. It's like the canine tooth. It does have it. It just doesn't eat other animals. Or it's by and large an insectivore, right? It eats insects. So Dhab', you could say aardwolf in this case. That's what I chose. The argument is it's going to be the hyena or this. So either one, there is a sheep in the event that that was killed. There is a sheep that would be offered in its place. For a gazelle, there's a sheep. For a hyrax and a lizard, there is a kid. These are all like, the sheep, the goats and stuff, the different names based on their ages. For a jerboa, there is a 4-month she-goat. For a rabbit, there is a she-kid less than a she-goat. For a hammam, there is a sheep. It's a bird. It's a type of bird. And market value is paid for animals without analogous type. So there's no like type, as I mentioned. This is the second category. Then you're going to take the market value. So the concept here behind this is, as mentioned before, you find the evidence for this in the Quran. فَجَزَاءٌ مِثْلُ مَا قَتَلَ مِنَ النَّعَمِ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in Surah Al-Ma'idah, this is verse number 95, so that there is reprisal or requital or a price equal to what was killed مِنَ النَّعَمِ, from the like livestock animals. So we're talking about camel and cow and sheep and goats. Those are the animals that we have as livestock. That's a na'am. So whatever was killed or hunted, then there's an appraisal animal or a similar animal you can find. And that's in the Quran. Gives us explicit instruction there as to the concept. And then after that, you'll find among the Prophet ﷺ, who appointed or selected kebshan for the dhab', right? We said a sheep was considered an equivalent to the dhab', which was either the aardwolf or / hyena. That was appointed by the Prophet ﷺ. And then after that is the judgment of the companions and what they determined. And so based on the determination of the companions for these animals, there's no need to go back and reestablish a ruling. We just take what they gave, and that's established ruling. That's done. It's not going to happen again because the companions, they knew better. They knew better as to what was equivalent for those animals. And of course, whatever they said is going to be more likely or closer to the truth. And this is based on a statement of the Prophet ﷺ. He says, Ashabi kan nujum, that my companions are like the stars. بِأَيِّهُمْ اقْتَدَيْتُمْ اِهْتَدَيْتُمْ. Any of them that you follow, you will be guided. If you follow them, any of them that you follow, you will be guided. All right. And I don't like going into the details too much here. It's simply because we're not doing a lot of hunting of animals along the route. And what is typically mentioned, if we're looking at Hidayat al-Raghib by Ibn Qaid, or you're looking at any of the other great works of the madhab, they'll start quoting you the references for these from the companions and what they judged for these animals, etc. And so, that's where they're just so you understand that there is some evidence that support the selection of these like-kind animals for what could possibly be hunted and killed along the route while in ihram or in the sanctuary. Yes, sir. If they were stopped, if they didn't make their their condition, if they were prevented from for whatever reason, then they would have to make, because they'd have to come out, they have to make tahallul. You have to disengage. So if you were stopped by the authorities for whatever, or anybody for whatever reason, if you didn't make a condition, then you would have to offer some type of sacrifice. And so here, one last thing to note, the bird that he mentions, hammam, there are other birds that are included with this. And this bird is considered or described like the bird that عَبَّ الْمَاء وَهَدَرْ, drinks water and then makes a sound of some sort. And that includes other birds like the pigeon, the dove, turtle dove, the grouse. Those are popular hunting birds, or birds that are hunted, I should say. The laughing dove. There's many birds that are mentioned that are all lumped into one category because they have similar qualities. And so, yeah, a sheep would be offered in their place. All right, let's move on to the next section here. Inshallah. The next section is going to be hunting, I believe, in the sanctuary, right? Tea break. Okay, so he says here, this is Faslun, he says, يَحْرُمُ صَيْدُ حَرَمِ مَكَّةَ عَلَى مُحِلٍ وَمُحْرِمٍ, that hunting in the sanctuary is impermissible for both the muhrim and non-muhrim, and its ruling is like a muhrim hunting. Okay, let's look at that again. يَحْرُمُ صَيْدُ حَرَمِ مَكَّةَ عَلَى مُحِلٍ وَمُحْرِمٍ وَحُكْمُهُ كَصَيْدِ مُحْرِمٍ. Okay, there you go. وَحُكْمُهُ كَصَيْدِ مُحْرِمٍ يَحْرُمُ صَيْدُ حَرَمِ مَكَّةَ عَلَى مُحِلٍ وَمُحْرِمٍ. So it's impermissible for muhillin وَمُحْرِمٍ, somebody that is a non-muhrim, muhil, and muhrim. It's impermissible to hunt in the sanctuary. And the ruling of it is وَحُكْمُهُ كَصَيْدِ مُحْرِمٍ. It's like a muhrim who's hunting. So it's one and the same. Someone that's in ihram or that's not in ihram, the ruling is the same when you're hunting in the haram. وَيَحْرُمُ قَطْعُ شَجَرِهِ وَحَشِيشِهِ إِلَّا الْيَابِسَ وَالْإِذْخِرَ. It's also, he says, impermissible to cut its trees and grass except for dried leaves and sweet grass. So now we're talking about Medina. I'm sorry, Mecca. The next section he talks about Medina. So we look here real quick. يَحْرُمُ صَيْدُ حَرَمِ مَكَّةَ عَلَى مُحِلٍ وَمُحْرِمٍ. This is a rule based on consensus. It's a hadith of Ibn Abbas, which the Prophet ﷺ said, يَوْمَ فَتْحِ مَكَّةَ, on the day in which Mecca was conquered, إِنَّ هَذَا الْبَلَدَ حَرَّمَهُ اللَّهُ يَوْمَ خَلَقَ السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضَ فَهُوَ حَرَامٌ بِحُرْمَةِ اللَّهِ إِلَى يَوْمِ الْقِيَامَةِ. That this is a place, this is a location which Allah has sanctified on the day in which He created the heavens and the earth. يَوْمَ خَلَقَ السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضَ. On the day that He created the heavens and the earth, He sanctified this place for حَرَامٌ بِحُرْمَةِ اللَّهِ. So it's a sanctuary based on Allah making it such, by the sanctified nature from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, ila yawm al-qiyamah, until the day of resurrection. So that gives you an idea as to the very special nature of these places, these sanctuaries. So وَحُكْمُهُ أَيْ حُكْمُ صَيْدِ الْحَرَمِ كَصَيْدِ مُحْرِمٍ, meaning the ruling of it, of hunting in the sanctuary is like a muhrim hunting in regards to the obligatory nature of al-jaza, what they have to do. We just talked about what they have to pay. Hatta ala as-saghir wal-kafir, right? Even when it comes to a young person and a non-Muslim. وَلَكِنْ بَحْرِيُّهُ لَا جَزَاءَ فِيهِ. But if there's a sea creature, there's no recompense for it. But if you're in the haram, there's no sea creature. But what happens if there was? What if there was somehow a flood or a river was made? And then they came in. They opened up something, you know? I mean, the possibility. وَلَكِنْ بَحْرِيُّهُ لَا جَزَاءَ فِيهِ. So in the event that there was some type of possibility to hunt sea creatures, meaning those are the creatures that live in the sea and that's it, then there would be no recompense for doing that. لَا جَزَاءَ فِيهِ. But you still can't hunt it. If you did, then there's nothing to pay. It's just you still can't do it. وَيَحْرُمُ قَطْءُ شَجَرِهِ. You're not permitted to cut the trees of the sanctuary, وَحَشِيشُهُ, and that's the قَطْءُ شَجَرِهِ or وَحَشِيشِهِ, that's the grass, which were like wild. These are like naturally occurring trees and grasses, not the ones that have been planted or harvested. And I shouldn't say harvested, that have been planted or sown, I should say. So if somebody were to go and plant a field of trees or grass, then those can be removed and those can be harvested. And of course, this is based on the Prophet ﷺ explicitly prohibiting cutting down trees or trimming the grass. إِلَّا الْيَابِسَ وَالْإِذْخِرَةِ. It's permissible to cut those things. And so the al-yabis, what's that? It's the dried up ones. They're like basically like the dead ones. And the sweet grass. These are except for like dried leaves, al-yabis, the dried leaves, and then the sweet grass that can be cut off. This is like hashish tayyibu ar-rih. That's what he describes it as. It has a nice smell to it, sweet grass, and it's permissible to take those and utilize them in some way. يُبَاحُ الْقِطَاعُ بِمَا زَالَ. You can take that which is fallen apart or it's broken بِغَيْرِ فِعْلِ آدَمِيٍّ وَلَوْ لَمْ يَنْفَصِلْ. Even if as long as it broke, it wasn't broken, like you don't go break it, then you can use it. It's something that broke. It naturally occurred. Then you can take that, even if it didn't totally come off, it's just kind of hanging there broken. You can take that and you can utilize that some way or another. وَيَحْرَمُ صَيْدُ حَرَمِ الْمَدِينَةِ. It's also hunting in the sanctuary of Medina is impermissible. And of course, Medina, he says, وَهُوَ مَا بَيْنَ لَابَتَيْهَا, between the two volcanic rock areas. Giving us the dimensions, if you will, trying to let us know the area of the sanctuaries. Today, alhamdulillah, the sanctuaries are well marked. They've done the work for us. You can find markers all around both sanctuaries, so you'll know at any access point, you will see a marker. So you'll know when you're entering into the sanctuary, either in Mecca or Medina. So there's no confusion as to whether you're in the sanctuary or not. You don't need to know the landmarks anymore because they have erected large stone signage. So when you're in Medina, there's a number of manners that must be observed. Mecca is more severe in terms of what you can't do, while Medina does have some rules, not quite as stringent as the others. He says, يَحْرُمُ صَيْدُ حَرَمِ الْمَدِينَةِ, that it is impermissible. Hunting in the sanctuary of Medina is impermissible. It's located between the two areas of volcanic rock. Is impermissible, but la jaza'a fi. There's no compensation to be offered, like that of Mecca. Remember, Hunting in the sanctuary is like a muhrim hunting. So there's going to be some type of compensation. In Medina, it's impermissible, but there's no compensation, like the sea creature in Mecca. Overlap there. If we were to do a Venn diagram, right, we're going to see check, 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 like that. Less checks down here in Medina. He does go on and he says, وَيُبَاحُ الْحَشِيشِ لِلْعَلَفِ وَآلَةُ حَرْثٍ وَنَحْوِهِ مِنْ شَجَرِهِ. So grass for fodder, like the stuff you're going to harvest to feed your animals, and wood from trees to make tilling tools is permissible. وَآلَةُ حَرْثٍ وَنَحْوِهِ وَنَحْوُهُ مِنْ شَجَرِهِ. So you can take stuff off the trees, utilize the wood in order to make tools and things that are going to make life possible. Remember, Medina is a farming community, or at least it was. Whereas Mecca was a merchant community. They weren't in need of those things, they weren't utilizing those things, but in Medina that was the nature of their economy. You can see here there's some hadith related to this. So we can use Ibn Qadi says وَيُبَاحْ اتِّخَاذُ آلَةِ حَرْثٍ وَنَحْوِهِ كَمَسَادِدَ وَآلَةِ رَحْلٍ. Basically you can put together your tools, things that you might need to ride on an animal. Those types of things can be made from the trees of Medina. And the narration is from Ahmad on Jabir ibn Abdullah أن النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم لما حرم المدينة قالوا يا رسول الله إنا أصحاب عمل. Right here, so you can see he made it a sanctuary, and they said قالوا, that means the companions, they said, O Messenger of Allah, إنا أصحاب عمل. We work. We work with our hands, basically. We get out there in the fields and we work. وأصحاب نضح وإنا لا نستطيع أرضا غير أرضنا فَرَخِّصْ لَنَا. So basically, right, they're saying, look, we harvest, we're unable to manage a land other than ours, to manage in a land other than ours, so grant us a concession. So he says, الْقَائِمَتَانِ وَالْوِسَادَةُ وَالْعَارِضَةُ وَالْمُسْنَدُ فَأَمَّا غَيْرُ ذَلِكَ فَلَا يُعْضَدُ وَلَا يَخْبَطُ مِنْهَا شَيْءٌ. Basically giving them some concessions on what they can use the trees for to make necessary items, tools, and structures, and so on and so forth. So that gives you a basic idea, or introduces you, I should say, to the manners of both sanctuaries in Mecca as well as in Medina. And that brings us to the next chapter. The next chapter is called Babu Dukhuli Mecca. And this is basically entering into Mecca. So the Imam al-Bahuti rahimahullah ta'ala goes on and he says, يُسَنُّ دُخُولُ مَكَّةَ نَهَارًا مِنْ أَعْلَاهَا وَالْمَسْجِدِ مِنْ بَابِ بَنِي شَيْبَةَ. Okay, it's preferred to enter Mecca during the day from its uppermost part, and the masjid from the door of Bani Shayba. يُسَنُّ دُخُولُ مَكَّةَ نَهَارًا مِنْ أَعْلَاهَا. So during the day, it's preferred that you go into Mecca. If you're going to go visit Mecca, making Hajj, making Umrah, it's preferred that you go into Mecca during the day, though it's not sinful to enter during the night. Sometimes that's out of your control anyway, based on the nature of your trip. And so there's a time and there's a place when it's best to go in, and from where it's best to go in. He says from its upper part, min a'laha, and that is Mount Kada. He says here, min thaniyati Kada. So there's a location for that. And to enter the masjid from the door is also the best way to leave is from Mount Kuda. Kada and Kuda. Kada, you go in to the upper part, and the lower part is where Mount Kuda is located, and that's where you would leave. So you would come in to Mecca from one area, and you would leave from another area altogether. That's the recommendation, but you could go in from and exit from anywhere. And to enter the masjid, you are recommended to enter the Masjid al-Haram min babi bani Shayba. And this is based on a narration found in Sahih Muslim and others on Jabir أن النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم دخل مكة ارتفاع الضحى وأناخ راحلته عند باب بني شيبة ثم دخل. Basically, the Prophet صلى الله عليه وسلم entered Mecca at the peak of duha. So that is during the day. And he made his camel kneel down at the door of Bani Shayba, and he entered. And if you look that up online, on Google, you do an image search for Bab Bani Shayba, then you could see there used to be this archway that was constructed there close. It's like on the Mataf, which is the Mataf today. You would see where people enter at Bani Shayba's area, basically. And they called that the Bab Bani Shayba because that's where Bani Shayba was located. And that's where the Prophet ﷺ went in. He goes on, Ibn Qaid mentions some more details. Well, Yusannu, so we got when, where to go in, when to go in, where to go in, and then Yusannu an yaqula inda dukhuli. What you say, it's recommended to say something when you go in, and that is Bismillah, wa billahi wa min Allahi wa ila Allahi, Allahumma aftah li abawaba fadlika. So this was mentioned by Ibn al-Jawzi in Asbab al-Hidayah. He narrated this supplication that it is recommended to say in the name of Allah, with Allah, from Allah, and to Allah. O Allah, open the doors of your virtue for me. And that's something recommended to be said when entering into the masjid there. He says, وَإِذَا رَأَى الْبَيْتِ, this is Imam al-Bahuti, وَإِذَا رَأَى الْبَيْتِ رَفَعَ يَدَيْهِ. Whoever sees the house should raise their hands. And we're talking about in prayer. Raise your hands. Right when you come into sight of the Kaaba, إِذَا رَأَى الْبَيْتِ, if you see the Kaaba, you should raise your hands. رَفَعَ يَدَيْهِ, you raise your hands like you're going to begin prayer. And so this is based on what the Prophet ﷺ did himself. Okay? And this was narrated by Ash-Shafi'i on Ibn Jurayj. So they reported that the Prophet ﷺ, he raised his hands. وَقَالَ, and you say, and this is of course after raising both hands, Allahumma anta salam wa minka salam, hayyina rabbana bis salam. Which means, oh our Lord, you are salam, peace, and from you comes peace. Our Lord, grant us a life of peace. Allahumma ameen. It's related by Imam Shafi'i. Ibn Umar used to say this. So it's of course attributed to the Prophet ﷺ, and then it's confirmed by the action of Ibn Umar radiyallahu anhuma. كان يقوله, and then he used to say that. Ibn Qadi says, وَالسَّلَامُ الْأَوَّلِ, the first salam, when you say Allahumma anta salam, this is Allah's name, one of his glorious names, as-salam. وَالثَّانِي, the second is derived from the saying, I honored him with peace. مَأْخُوذٌ مِّن قَوْلِهِمْ أَكْرَمْتُهُ بِالسَّلَامِ, meaning with the greeting of peace. أَكْرَمْتُهُ بِالسَّلَامُ عَلَيْكُمْ. I honored the person with the greeting of peace. And the third salam in that supplication, Hayyina Rabbana bis salam, means or is a prayer to have salam or peace from all calamities. Meaning here, Salimna minha bitahiyyatika iyana. Right? To save us from all calamities by way of your greeting us. Greeting us, Hayyina Rabbana bis salam. That's the prayer. By way of your greeting us with peace, we're asking that Allah save us from any trial and calamity that may befall us. And then after that he says, Rabbana bis salam, Allahumma zid hadha al-bayta ta'ziman wa tashrifan wa takriman wa mahabatan wa birra. And then after that you say, Oh Allah, increase this house in glory. going to increase. We ask that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, meaning he says here, Allahumma zid hadha al-bayta ta'ziman, ay tabjilan, glory or reverence, wa tashrifan, which is rif'atan wa yala'an, basically in its loftiness and grandness, if you will. Wa takriman, tafdilan, that's like its dignity or virtue. Solemnity, which would be mahabatan, which is tawqiran. Wa ijlalan, basically like respect and splendor. Wa birran bi kasr al-ba'i wa ismu jami'un lil khair. And then in veneration, which is essentially all forms of good. So now we're asking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to venerate and increase the house that we have come to visit. After that, and then another, it continues, وَزِدْ مَنْ عَظَّمَهُ وَشَرَّفَهُ مِمَّنْ حَجَّهُ وَاعْتَمَرَ تَعْظِيمًا وَتَشْرِيفًا وَتَكْرِيمًا وَمَحَبَّةً وَبِرًّا. And then you're going to pray, increase the one who glorifies and honors it of whoever makes Hajj and Umrah out of its glory, honor, dignity, solemnity, and veneration. And this was related by Imam Shafi'i on the authority of Ibn Jurayj, which we've already been looking at this narration now. It's just continuing us to continue to provide more information. All right, so we're praying for the house. We're praying for all those that visit the house and make that prayer for the house. Okay? And then the prayer continues. It says, Alhamdulillah, Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen, kama huwa ahluhu wa kama yanbaghi li karami wajhihi azza wa jal. وعز جلاله والحمد لله الذي بلغني بيته. وكما ينبغي لكرم وجهه وعز جلاله والحمد لله الذي بلغني بيته. Here's all praises for Allah, the Lord of the worlds. And we're praising Allah when we say Alhamdulillah, Hamdan Kathiran. Alhamdulillah, you're saying Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen Kathiran. Much praise, abundant praise is offered for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as He is deserving in a manner befitting His noble wedge, His face, if you will, and mighty sublimity. All praises for Allah who has brought me to His house, having seen me worthy of it. بلغني بيته ورآني لذلك أهلا. That's the continuation. والحمد لله على كل حال. اللهم إنك دعوت حج بيتك الحرام وقد جئتك لذلك. اللهم تقبل مني واعف عني وأصلح لي شأني كله لا إله إلا أنت يرفع بذلك صوته. He says you're going to raise your voice when making this supplication. So that basically means here, all praises for Allah who has brought me to His house, having seen me worthy of it. All praises for Allah in every condition. O Allah, you have called to the pilgrimage of your sanctified house. So I have come to you for that. O Allah, accept it and pardon me, rectify all of my affairs. There is no deity worthy of worship but you. Okay. Yeah, I get stuck every time. وَرَآنِي لِذَلِكَ أَهْلًا. الحمد لله الذي بلغني بيته ورآني لذلك أهلا. He had caused me to get to your house and have seen me to be worthy of such a thing. Khair, inshallah. All right, after that supplication is made, okay, that's why you're standing there. That's the supplication you would make when you first see the Kaaba. You're standing there, your hands are raised. ثُمَّ يَطُوفُ حَالَةَ كَوْنِهِ مُطَّبِعًا نَدْبًا فِي كُلِّ أُسْبُوعِهِ إِن لَمْ يَكُنْ حَامِلًا مَعْذُورٍ. Okay, so here it is. Then you should make tawaf with the middle of the top wrap under the right shoulder. This is ittiba'. Ittiba'. Okay, so that's when the man, of course, this is going to be for men. The women aren't wearing the ridat. It's where you take the middle portion of it. So if you had it long ways out, the middle portion of it would go under your armpit. And the other ends would come around the opposite shoulders so that one arm is exposed. And that is going to be the outer arm, so that if people were looking on to the mataf area while you're making tawaf, they would see an exposed arm. Okay? And the idea behind that, the concept behind that, is that when the Muslims went to make tawaf, they exposed their strength. Yeah. They showed the onlooking enemy, the Quraysh, the idolaters that had prevented them and who were basically run them out, they were engaged with, that they were strong, capable people. And that continued after that. Even the companions noted that they were no longer an enemy. They were now among us, but we continue to do that because that is what the Prophet ﷺ had us do, and so we continue to do that. So that tradition comes with a meaning, to show strength. And it gives us an idea that sometimes, in some circumstances, it's a good thing to show strength and not to cower all the time and to hide and conceal. But we have to sometimes exert some and show some strength. Look, we're capable. We may have to deliver a concept and say, look, we can do, even if we don't do. Because they're there, and they could do, but they didn't do. It's delivering a concept. We have the power and the might. But we're not here for that. We want worship. We want peace from all the calamities. But if need be, we'll expose the other one too. There's two guns under here, you know? Yeah. All right, so that's what happens there. And it says under the right shoulder, and the other ends, they go over the left shoulder. Once the tawaf is complete, this manner of wrapping is discontinued. All right, so once you finish the tawaf, then that shoulder is covered. You don't just keep walking around like that. You don't even come to Mecca like that, with your arm exposed. You come fully covered. Both of your shoulders are covered with that ridat. And then when you begin your tawaf, that's when the shoulder is exposed. And then when the tawaf is finished, then it is covered. That's an important note to make. He says, وَيَبْتَدِئُ مُتَمَتِّعٌ بِطَوَافِ الْعُمْرَةِ. The mutamatti', which we talked about, as from the types, Hajj types, whether it was the mutamatti', the qarin, or the mufrid, right? So the mutamatti' begins with tawaf for umrah as a recommendation. Okay, as a recommendation here. Nadban li'anna tawafa tahiyyatul Kaaba. Begin this tawaf. This is a manner in which the Kaaba is greeted, like prayer is how the masjid is greeted. When you go for tahiyyatul masjid, when you come into a masjid, you pray rak'atayn, so long as it's not in the prohibited times, according to the madhab. Then here, tawaf would be similar to that in terms of greeting the Kaaba. It's done with tawaf. And that tawaf is done, and then prayer is how the masjid is greeted, which is suffice with the 2 rakas of tawaf. Because now you're in the masjid as well. So once you finish making tawaf, there's a rak'atayn that are done after it. That's how it works. 7 times around and then rak'atayn. 7 times around and rak'atayn. That's how the tawaf works. It works in sets of 7, like the prayer works in mathna, like it goes in 2, like that, or more. So there's like there's a set amount. And then once you've done 7 rounds, then you make rak'atayn. And so once you pray rak'atayn tawaf, then that would suffice your tahiyyat al-masjid. So that is in regards to the mutamatti' beginning with tawaf of umrah. It says, وَيَبْتَدِئُ غَيْرُهُ, meaning the other hajj types, al-qarin wal-mufrid bi-tawaf al-qudum. Then they're going to, everyone else is going to begin with the tawaf of arrival. That's what that's called, tawaf al-qudum. They're still going to make tawaf, it's just a different type. The basic nature of it is, the structure is the same. وَيَبْتَدِئُ طَائِفٌ مِنَ الْحَجْرِ الْأَسْوَدِ. And the person that's making tawaf, whether they are mutamattih or qarin or mufrad, they're all going to embark upon it in the same way. The tawaf is begun at the black stone. This is here. غَيْرُهُ بِطَوَافِ الْقُدُومِ وَيَبْتَدِئُ مِنَ الْحَجْرِ الْأَسْوَدِ. They're going to begin the black stone. وَيُحَاذِيهِ. Basically, they're going to be facing it. They're going to face it entirely, or partially. Meaning facing the hajar. Either you're facing it entirely or you're facing it partially with your entire body directed at the black stone. Toward, entire body directed toward it with one's face. Okay, here it says, بِكُلِّ بَدَنِهِ وَيَسْتَقْبِلُهُ بِوَجْهِهِ وَيَسْتَلِمُهُ. And then you're going to touch the black stone. يَمْسَحُ الْحَجَرَ بِيَدِهِ الْيُمْنَى. You're going to touch it with your right hand. There's a hadith in which it says, إِنَّهُ نَزَلَ مِنَ الْجَنَّةِ أَشَدَّ بَيَاضًا مِنَ اللَّبَنِ. That the black stone descended from paradise, whiter than milk. فَسَوَّدَتْهُ خَطَايَا بَنِي آدَمَ. And then it became blackened by the sins of Adam's offspring. This is found in at-Tirmidhi. Is considered authentic by his standards. وَيُقَبِّلُهُ. You're going to kiss the black stone بِلَا صَوْتٍ يَظْهَرُ لِلْقُبْلَةِ. I liked this a lot, by the way. I liked this a lot. You're going to kiss the black stone. There's a detail that many are unaware of. It's a detail here. And it translates, by the way, into other scenarios, okay? It's a kiss bila sawt. And in some cultures, when you greet, you kiss. It's in the Arab world, it's well known, like that. But there's one bila sawt. And there are. Yep, you can, like in the Emirates, they when they hit the nose, yeah, you can make that sound, but bila sawt is like, whoa. How do you know about that? Yeah, so here, it is it's noted here. It's noted here, kissing without making a sound. It was narrated by Umar of the Prophet ﷺ, faced the stone, placed his lips upon it, and cried for some time. He then turned to see Umar crying and said, "Oh Umar, here is where you shed tears." As Ibn Umar and Ibn Abbas did, it is then prostrated upon. So kiss it without sawt, and then you can prostrate on it. So the Prophet ﷺ kissed it, and that's where he began to weep. He says, وَضَعَ شَفَتَيْهِ عَلَيْهِ وَيَبْكِي عَلَيْهِ يَبْكِي طَوِيلًا. So that's why there was no sawt. He stayed there, and he was crying. Omar was crying, as was often the reaction of the companions, seeing the Prophet ﷺ cry. And then that's what he said. This is where tears are shed. Rahu ibn Majah. And then you can prostrate upon it. As I mentioned, Ibn Umar and Abbas were reported to have done so as well. فَإِنْ شَقَّ تَقْبِيلُهُ. Right, so why I mentioned the connection there, it's that greeting, a greeting that you might give somebody, bila sawt. It may have the same response, like this is, like that situation in which you're there kissing the black stone is a very special moment. You would remember many things. The hadith is mentioned here by Ibn Qa'id for a reason. He mentions the hadith, نَزَلَ مِنَ الْجَنَّةِ أَشَدُّ بَيَاضًا مِنَ اللَّبَنِ. It became down white, but فَسَوَّدَتْهُ خَطَايَا بَنِي آدَمَ. Right? And why would you shed tears? You'd be reminded of that, of the poor, impoverished nature that we possess of being sinners. And yeah, it's a very special moment. It's a heartfelt moment. It's a very soft moment of the Prophet's life. And so perhaps, when I was thinking about this and the correlation between those different types of greetings, that such a greeting like that with somebody else might be a shared moment with somebody special, if they were cognizant and aware of the meaning behind that kiss bila sawt, right? It just seems like an everyday little, but you know. Anyway, that's just one of those personal things, personal reflection. So after that he says, "Min shaqqa taqbiluhu," if it's difficult to kiss it due to crowding, فَيَسْتَلِمُهُ بِيَدِهِ وَقَبَّلَهَا, then in that case you're going to touch the black stone with your hand and you're going to kiss your hand. بِلَا مُزَاحَمَةٍ, and that is so long as there is no overcrowding. And this was narrated by Muslim on Ibn Abbas, and the Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam استلمه وقبل يده. So the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam was related from Ibn Abbas that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam touched the black stone and then he kissed his hand. If that's difficult, he says, فَإِنْ شَقَّ أَشَارَ إِلَيْهِ. If that is difficult, meaning touching it with the hand, if it's difficult to touch it with the hand, استلامه بيده استلمه بشيء وقبله. You can touch it with something else. Maybe it's a stick or something you can touch the black stone with that stick. وقبله, then you can kiss that. فإن شق أيضا أشار إليه أي إلى الحجر بيده أو بشيء ولا يقبله. Right, then you can gesture with your hand, like point at it or wave at it with your hand or with something else, but you're not going to kiss it at that point because it didn't come in contact. لما روى البخاري وعن ابن عباس قال طاف النبي على بعير فلما أتى الحجر أشار إليه بشيء في يده وكبر. So here this hadith found in Sahih Bukhari. So the Prophet ﷺ made tawaf on the camel, and when he came to the stone, he made a gesture to it. Something bishay'in fi yadihi. He had something in his hand and he gestured to it. وَكَبَّرَ, meaning he made takbir. Said Allahu Akbar. Again, you can find this in Sahih Bukhari. And then he goes on, Imam al-Bahuti, he says, وَيَقُولُ كُلَّمَا أَسْتَلَمَهُ, every time you touch it, Bismillahi Wallahu Akbar. اللهم إيمانا بك وتصديقا بكتابك ووفاء بأهدك واتباعا لسنة نبيك محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم. You say, in the name of Allah, Allah is the greatest. O Allah, with faith in you, belief in your book, fulfilling your covenant, following the way of your Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So basically you're going to say this every time you touch it while directing one's face, your face toward the black stone. Right, this is something that has been related. Again, another hadith from the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam, on the authority of Abdullah ibn Sa'ib, and the Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam kana yaqulu dhalika inda istilamihi. That's what he would say every time he touched the black stone. ثُمَّ يَجْعَلُ الْبَيْتَ عَنْ يَسَارِهِ. And then, with the Kaaba on the left side, and this is how the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam made tawaf. You're going to make the Kaaba on your left side, such that the closest side of your body to the Kaaba is the left. Okay? And then you're going to make 7 rounds. ثُمَّ يَجْعَلُ الْبَيْتَ عَنْ يَسَارِهِ وَيَطُوفُ سَبْعًا. You're going to make 7 rounds around it. يَرْمُلُ الْأُفُقِيُّ فِي هَذَا الطَّوَافِ ثَلَاثًا ثُمَّ يَمْشِي أَرْبَعًا يَسْتَلِمُ الْحَجَرَ وَالرُّكْنَ الْيَمَانِيَّ فَقَطْ كُلَّ مَرَّةٍ وَلَا يُقَبِّلُ. So here you have these 7 rounds. He says those coming from the horizons, this is al-ufuqi. Those who are coming from far away, in ihram, they're going to jog. In this tawaf only. In this tawaf, they're going to jog. And the jog is done with short strides, meaning you're not taking these long steps, but they're short strided, jog. And that's going to be done in the first 3 times around the Kaaba, and then you're going to walk at a normal pace in the remaining 4 without jogging. And this is based on what the Prophet ﷺ did himself. وَلَا يُسَنُّ رَمَلٌ لِحَامِلٍ مَعْذُورٍ. So this jogging is obviously not recommended for people who are hamilin ma'dhur. They're being carried when nisa'in, for women. وَمُحْرِمٍ مِّن مَكَّةَ, somebody that's made ihram from Mecca. أو قُرْبِهَا, or they've come from close by. Remember, there's a close by and then there's a far away. وَلَا يُقْضَى فِيهَا رَمَلٌ فَاتٍ. And you're not going to make up if any of the jogging was missed. So if in the event that you couldn't do it in the first 3, you're not going to be making it up in the last 4. Maybe it's tight, too crowded. You can't. So crowded that even trying to do that little, like acting it out, is near impossible to do. That's possible. I mean, that happens on a regular occurrence now with the sheer volume of visitors. So لا يقضى فيها رمل, that missed. He says والرمل أولى من الدنو من البيت. And so here, this addresses that issue a little bit. Should I get closer to the Kaaba? And that's where you would have problems being able to do that ramal. Because the closer you are, the more crowded it is, and the less likely you are to do that. So he says, فَالرَّمَلُ أَوْلَى. Being able to jog is preferred over being close to the Kaaba, which means that if going in would prevent you from jogging, then you want to step back out so that you could take care of this recommendation, right? So basically, it's recommended, it's more stress to do that than it is, or more rewarding to do that than it is to be close up to the Kaaba. وَلَا يُسَنُّ رَمُلٌ وَالطِّبَاعٌ فِي غَيْرِ هَذَا الطَّوَافِ. Again, there's no ramal, this jogging, or uncovering the arm in other tawafs that are made. It's this one in which those things are recommended. It says, وَيُسَنُّ أَنْ يَسْتَلِمَ الْحَجَرَ وَالرُّكْنَ الْيَمَانِيَ فَقَطْ كُلَّ مَرَّةٍ عِنْدَ مَحَاذَاتِهَا هِمَا. So basically here, when you are next to or in line with the stone and the Yemeni corner, you're going to touch it every time. The Yemeni corner is not kissed, it's touched. When opposite of them this is recommended, based on Ibn Umar saying the Prophet ﷺ would not forgo touching the Yemeni corner or black stone in tawaf. This is also something that Nafi said Ibn Umar used to do, as found in Sunnah Abi Dawud. Kissing the Yemeni corner has not been reported. Kissing the Yemeni corner has not been reported. If it's difficult to touch the Yemeni corner, a gesture to both is to be made. So if you can't touch the Yemeni corner, just like the black stone, you can make a gesture with your hand to it. The other corner is known as Rukn al-Shami, and this is the first corner that you're going to pass when making tawaf. And then the other one after that is called Rukn al-Gharbi. These two are not to be touched. There's nothing related or reported in that regard. Okay, we'll wrap it up here. All right, yeah, I think we wrap it up right there, inshallah. I think that if we start into more, then we're going to get cut off kind of mid-thought. So we'll pick it up here, inshallah, next week. And then we'll move into discussing the description of Hajj and the various rites and rituals that have to be performed. Jazakallah khair for your attendance. Wa sallallahu wa sallam ala nabiyyina Muhammad wa akhiru da'wana. Alhamdulillahi rabbil alameen.